Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and it's kind of my great pleasure to be doing this video. Wish I was doing it on other terms, but finally I got together with a man known as the Last Vagabond, Ryan Christian. He runs thelastvagabond.com. And, this morning I was actually listening to one of his videos in the shower, this one right here, even more evidence pointing to the coronavirus starting in the United States. Don't question officials from the World Health Organization or the Chinese CDC or the World Bank or Johnson & Johnson or anybody that was sitting at the table at Event 201, really, or anybody that runs those people, or you might get demonetized. So as I was actually getting my coffee and going through my feed, I see that YouTube pulls the plug on one of the better places for information in these very strange times. His name is Ryan Christian. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Jason. It's good to be on your show. We've definitely two that have, been needing to connect for a while now. Definitely love your show, love your work. So it's good for us to come together. The Last American Vagabond is my website, my channel, and everything. You can search that and find it pretty much anywhere. So pleasure to be here, man.
Well, again, thanks for coming on. We should have done this before, for sure. Like, we should have been doing this for at least the past couple months, and now hopefully we will be connecting a little bit more. But why don't you tell people how you get into the alternative media in the first place? Because I know, especially in this political climate, if you will, of the past 3-4 years, it's hard to build a following on YouTube and get past the algorithm in general.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Just in briefly how I started this. Ultimately, I'm a chef by profession. That's I went to the Culinary Institute of America in Napa Valley. Was running kitchens for a long time before this, and just kind of somewhere along the line had that moment that we all experienced, where I suddenly was just kind of like, okay, we're all being lied to, right? You just to sum that up in a long, painful process. I just realized that we're being deceived by people and decided to start doing my own thing and just started to, blog this and write that and just doing my own little side projects. And long story short, over a period of time, it just kind of caught attention of certain people, started to grow. And, another jump forward just became something that was actually potentially a viable thing that I could do in and of itself.
Sure.
And working a job as a chef for 40 hours a week, just there's no way you can do both. So I finally just decided to take a shot in the dark. And I love cooking. It's a passion of mine. But I just put that on hold, quit my job, and just went for it. And for a long time, it was a really risky point where I might have had to, do something else, get another job, but finally it just kind of taken off, and it's donation run. People, the only reason this channel exists is because people support it. And it actually started about cannabis predominantly. It was all about cannabis law reform and the lies there, and just over time branched out into just things you're being deceived on, and a real heavy foreign policy focus today. But it's, anyone out there, it's just the drive to go out there and do it, take the time to research and do these things for yourself. Anyone's capable of it.
I absolutely agree. And, I've been doing this on and off now for, professionally, I guess, for over 15 years. And there are times where it has been economically viable and it hasn't. And I've jumped in, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes it doesn't. But currently this show would not be on the air right now without the support of the viewers and, outlets like GoFundMe. I don't even use the Patreon because they decide politically what they like and what they don't. I don't see that as much, at least on that other platform. Before we get going and start talking about coronavirus coverage, where were you at 4 months ago? Where were you at 2 months ago? Where are you at today? How can people financially support you if they like your work?
Well, yeah, since what you brought up at the beginning was this morning, YouTube essentially just pulled the plug on all possible monetization options on my channel. But for those of us that know, that's always kind of been a joke, because even if they pretend you're monetized, for a lot of people like us, they still will automatically demonetize your video before you even go live. I could write puppies and ice cream and go live and they'll demonetize it before it even happens. Mm-hmm. We are demonetized, right? Not the channel, the person. Sure. And so it's really a small hit at the end of the day, but it removed memberships and it removed super chats, and it was growing. People were doing that. So really for today, for people that want to support the channel, you can still do so through Patreon, but I share your apprehensions there. But I recommend you just, find ways to donate. You can reach out to me at Ryan@thelасtamericanvagabond.com, and I'll give you somewhere you can send a check if you'd like. But anywhere, PayPal, pretty much anything you can find and reach out and send us that way. But, these things are always changing. So whatever way is, ultimately the point is to support the work. Share your video, share this video. That's what really matters.
And that's what I tell people to do. It's great if you want to financially support me, but even if you're putting this on an email chain, if you're sharing the information, that's what we need. It's all about the information, because without these people getting it out, we don't really stand a chance. I'm not doing this because I want to be some kind of personality. I'm doing it because the mainstream media has failed me. The alternative media continues to fail me. Right now, I'm stuck in between people that want to believe everything that's on TV. Oh, everything's going to be back to normal in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks. We're going to spend Easter together. To the other end of the spectrum, that martial law is awesome and the deep state is going down, Q style, baby. So to find somebody that's actually looking at the information, is being the right amount of cynical, in my opinion, is not speaking authoritatively, which I love. You say, look, I'm not telling you to believe me. This is where I'm getting my information from. You make the decision. I'll tell you when it's my opinion and when it's a fact. And I think that's absolutely key, because with the numbers that are now being reported in Italy, Spain, even the United States surpassing the death toll in China, it is now very, very apparent that George Gao and the Chinese CDC were dishonest. Shocking about the numbers. I mean, when you see videos of people getting stabbed in the neck and drug around in the streets and walked around like dogs, and they say 3,000 in a city of 60 million, that doesn't really jive with reality. And so much from the NASA imagery to the fact that they moved the Uyghur Muslims in from West China into over 80 factories to restart the economy would show that this was much more than 3,000 deaths, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, this is what's so frustrating about this discussion today. Is it's like, does anybody before this, did anybody have the illusion that Chinese government was completely honest all the time? I mean, governments lie, people. I mean, are they trying to cover up something about what's happening there? That's almost a guarantee in my mind. I think the same thing's happening here to some degree. But yeah, I mean, I think what we saw happen there was just what we're seeing a lot of these governments try to grapple with now. They're like, well, first it's, well, we don't want everyone to think we can't handle this, so they're hiding information, and it evolves. But at every step of the way, these governments are trying to manage their narratives, and that's what's so important to see. It's like, but what's interesting is just because we're potentially can see that China lied about one thing or the other, that doesn't necessarily then simultaneously prove the other side of the narrative that all of what they're saying is true. You know what I mean? Correlation's not causation. We know all these things, right? There's points in this that we can see they're lying, and we just have to take those as data points and continue down the path, because there's a lot of conflicting narratives. But ultimately, to your point, did China lie? Could they lie? Of course. I think that's obvious to everyone who's being honest with themselves.
And that's why I've been focusing so much on Event 201 and actually watching each of the videos with my audience and going through the parallels, because what do you have? You have a roundtable at Davos, the World Economic Forum, put on by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who, with Johnson & Johnson, they're going to save us with a vaccine. Johnson & Johnson also sitting at the table. Tom Inglesby of Johns Hopkins, because it's put on in conjunction with them, is basically the moderator and, basically the script mover. He's literally on television telling us what to do the entire time. You have George Gao of the CDC. They're talking about narratives. You have his counterpart, Stephen Rice. And you have the World Health Organization there. You have Marriott there. You have the World Bank there. You have ANZ Bank there as well. And never are they really concerned that the airlines are there, concerned about health or how many people are dying. They're talking about moving markets and maintaining control and maintaining the narrative, criminalizing people that would question whether or not this was a bioweapon from the United Nations, from Big Pharma. Don't question. And even suggesting that you jail these people. I mean, this is all in that forum. Now, am I supposed to believe the Chinese CDC? They obviously lied. We just had a woman in Taiwan on behalf of her media talking to a representative of the World Health Organization. In my opinion, Taiwan not shutting down, doing massive testing, not moving towards martial law, has been a positive thing. And when she asks him whether or not this would allow them to join the UN, the World Health Organization, he ignores the question. He acts like he doesn't hear her. And then she goes, excuse me, and he goes, I missed the question. She says, let me ask it again. He goes, no, ask another one. Then she tries to ask it again. If you haven't seen this video, it's incredible. He hangs up on her on Skype. They get him back on later. She asked basically again about Taiwan's response and how the World Health Organization felt about it. And instead of responding to that, because it's not authoritarian enough, it's not world government enough, what does he say? Well, China did a super fantastic job. So they keep pushing China with the World Health Organization. It's right in our face. These are unelected bureaucrats, minions of the predator class. And to me, my friend, this has been and is now very much in our face as the new civil rights movement. Doesn't matter the color of your skin. Doesn't matter your gender. Doesn't even matter what nation state you reside in. It is the predator class, and it is us who are on lockdown.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely, we have to begin to look at this out, even though I think there are competing lower level agendas, whether you're talking about country or state even, but I think we have to begin to think larger in regard to possible coordination amongst these other governments. I mean, just from the basic idea that we can have, there's more than one, by the way. There's Event 201, there was Crimson Contagion. We have all these different things from beforehand, right? Mm-hmm. So just at Event 201, you have everyone. And by the way, you list off those people. How is that not the most obvious thing in the world? Yeah, we need airlines and bankers and vaccine companies to protect you. It's like profit, obviously, right? It's just so clear. But you have all these people sitting around this table that are, people from, as you said, the CDC in China, from all these different people that are seemingly at cross purposes. And then we have this massive thing happen right afterward. And obviously a control of the flow of information. I mean, I think you're ultimately right. Whether there are things that we don't understand, which I think is kind of a foregone conclusion, or what, and going on with this whole thing, every angle we have governments trying to use it to force in what they think they need to accomplish, right? Whether it's, cashless society, or whether it's just completely shutting down free press and free speech. These are agendas we've all been warning about forever, and they're coming down from every angle right now, and all people can think about is virus. There's no way you can look at that and not be like, was that completely orchestrated to achieve basically every single one of their agendas at once? Mm-hmm. Seems like a good deal for them.
Well, for instance, you've got the head of the World Health Organization, and this is over a month ago, and it's funny because I got one of those bot accounts that was defending Event 201 from some of my videos, and he posted the video where he's talking about being a young man in a world full of turmoil and despair and distraught. And he was in some classroom, and someone asks, well, how will we get all of the human race together? And of course, it's a threat from another planet. It's the old trope of the alien threat. And he goes, well, we got the threat right here. And he just looks so gleeful and happy. Before we get back, I got 2 super chats. Costling Consulting says, appreciate you both. Because of y'all, I am prepared as I can be for this situation. Exactly, as you can be. Thank you. And then Peaceful Warrior says, no mods, Jason. I am offended. Actually, the mods just got in. One mod. What's up, Drufus? How we doing, brother? But let's talk about your journey, because my journey was one of denial as well. When I first started, my first video on this is a walk and talk with my dog where I'm saying, have a beer and a coronavirus, and kind of laughing it off like this is going to be the next SARS. Or actually, when I first heard and saw about it, it made me think of South Park. And we can even get into that in China and the censorship there. But where the SARS outbreak is there, they're rubbing people with SARS on blankets to stop Indian casinos. And it was Randy Marsh sitting there with basically the exaggerated cold going, Stan, and asking for ginger ale, Turned out to be a lot different. So, my big turning point, obviously, when I started seeing the videos out of China, I'm like, well, if this isn't real, they're certainly going to crunch down on dissidents. And I go, if it is real, they could still do that. And then I was like, well, Iran isn't doing so well. Let's see how a first world nation handles this. And as soon as Italy really started to blow up, and I was in D.C. and I saw the panic buying, that's where it switched over for me. Somewhere in mid-February is where I really said, okay, this is coming here in some respect, at least financially. What was the journey like for you to come to the realization that, we're in still a slow motion, 1929 meets 9/11 is COVID 1984?
Yeah, I think it's hard because I don't think we know for sure any of those things. I haven't completely removed the possibility from my mind that this is potentially some massive orchestrated psyop. I don't think that's the case. I'll just come right out and say that. I think the evidence clearly points in the direction of some other things. But it's just so important to recognize that is it possible that they could have somehow, even just say from a U.S. government level, orchestrated some kind of a psyop that this is happening in this country, but it's really not? they're capable of that. I think we all know that. But the idea that basically, to your question, my journey started for me where I was really conflicted about this, just like you were saying, MERS and SARS, these things that even though most Americans somehow don't seem to know this, they verifiably lied about. Like we have Cheryl Atkinson proved in one case that they just stopped counting numbers, yet we're still telling us more numbers. Like, it's just apparent that there's a profit motive and a manipulation there. So in this case, I'm thinking, okay, here we go, right? Right off the bat, we get, oh, look, it's on the Lysol bottle, those kind of things. That's like, coronaviruses are a category. They've been around forever. Like, it's just they're playing on the lack of information most people have on these topics. And then it started getting to the point, like you said, where we're seeing horrifying things coming out of China, which, by the way, a lot of these videos have since then been shown to be false. Some of them are absolutely true. And regardless, China's capable of all those things anyway. But there was propaganda happening there. And so I'm still skeptical. What's happening? Is this some kind of an attack now? That's where I'm thinking, like, is this an orchestrated thing from the United States government? Because I've done lots of work in the past about the obvious verifiable times the U.S. government has attacked foreign countries as well as its own people to test things. They've admitted to that over 239 times. That's a fact. Right?
They sprayed cadmium sulfate on poor neighborhoods, not only via planes, but under station wagons. Like, that's what they've sprayed cadmium sulfate on people, folks. Just think about that radioactive material on the surf class, and it wasn't that long ago. In fact, what really worried me is Trump was talking about getting rid of all these barriers to make a vaccine, was activating the Department of Energy. Well, if you know anything about what the Department of Energy really was, it was kind of an operation for eugenics underground during that Roswell era. What do you think was really going on at Area 51? When you see all that human experimentation that Bill Clinton had to admit to, and it was the size of 3 phone books, that is still just a marginal amount of what they told you.
All right, it's only what we get, right? That's the. I love the analogy Caitlin Johnstone always uses. Like, so imagine that what you just explained was you looking through the crack of a door, right? You're getting a glimpse of what's going on behind that door. But if you were to swing that door wide open, imagine if that's all we're getting to see. Imagine what else is actually happening. Like, that's horrifying to think about. But for people out there to recognize, look up things like Operation Sea Spray. I mean, this is like the surface level discussion of that. But there's so many of them where they knowingly sprayed and in some cases killed Americans just to test out things that they were working on. And,
while we're talking biological warfare, I think it's really important, number one, to point out that this is not La La Land. And even this year, after a long, long struggle, literally decades struggle to expose Lyme disease as a biological weapon that was utilized by ticks in a lab, or got loose somehow, that started to gain ground in U.S. government circles, and people demanding investigations into that. Lyme disease has crippled tens of millions of Americans, and people don't, again, if they don't know about it, if they're not in a certain area where it's concentrated, they don't understand it, and they, again, had bought that same line. Well, it just mutated in ticks, Ryan.
God, I mean, and that's a big one too. Lyme disease and ticks. I mean, a great video I'll recommend is Truthstream Media. They did a whole video about, just search Truthstream Media and Plum Island. And I'm sure you've probably seen it. It's horrifying stuff. But people like Dr. Boyle, the person who drafted the U.S. Biological Warfare Act, I'm sure you're familiar with. He's gone on record numerous times saying all of these things: foot and mouth disease, Lyme disease, MERS, SARS. All these things are man-made bioweapons that were released intentionally. I mean, anthrax, Amerithrax, the whole thing. We know about these things. These were proven to have that came from Fort Detrick, and that even at first it was Saddam Hussein, but then it was like, oh, secretly it was one of our own people. He's a crazy one. Don't talk about it.
Well, first it was Al-Qaeda, because if you got that first note that was going on it was down with Israel, it was 9/11/01, and they cycled between 3 separate people that they tried to blame it on. At first it wasn't even connected to Fort Detrick until they found out it was micronized. I mean, these are real things that happen. And I want to talk about the Hollywood angle and the propaganda angle in a second, but we got a couple super chats. Asama Number says 9 George Washingtons. I cannot tell a lie, and some loose change. Big respect, Burmis and Ryan. Oh, we're not going to say that. That next one. Sorry, I disagree with you there. I appreciate the super chat. And then Ryan Erickson says, much love and appreciation for all you do, man. Well, I appreciate you. So let's talk about The propaganda, the psychological
Well, if
warfare.
I could just jump in real quick, just because I want people to understand, I'll go through real quickly, finish the evolution of my
Sure.
thought. There is that just so I was a China bioweapon. That's obviously where I think it's still a viable discussion. But then all of a sudden, when we obviously saw things jump and change, China start kind of going away. At least so we're being told. They jumped to Italy and Iran. I started then immediately just thinking to myself that more so this was an attack, but possibly that it was a secondary attack. That we have something that might have just happened, leak, accidental, whatever. But then we have the introduction of a totally different strain, which early on China showed us in their studies that they found out that there was a strain that was happening and there was an older strain that was tied back to bats, right? That's been just ignored. An older strain, meaning it's something that was already there. Right. So I definitely then started thinking about the play of an ethnically focused bioweapon that was introduced on top of what was going on, and then, as we've progressed into the last couple of weeks, I started really beginning to question again, whether or not some of this is just all fabrication. I do think in my mind that we're dealing with something right now because we can clearly see people suffering from something. But I think there's also a layer of psyop in there, potentially even in part bringing in the other numbers, the pneumonia, the flu, that could very easily, if maliciously done, be just kind of molded in the same way they do with pneumonia and the regular flu today, right? So possibly there's some level of this being hyped. Ultimately, I think I've come to the conclusion that there's definitely something we're dealing with, but again, who ultimately knows for sure? So go ahead.
Well, no, let's talk about that for a second because I wanted to talk about the two strains. That's been mainline news now for over a month. It's been largely ignored by the media except for in passing and try to promote it as a mutation. Well, this is a bioweapon, and neither strain seems to attack infants as much or children as much. It certainly seems to be directed at people. I have thought from number one, and why I was so interested in your video this morning, is that we don't know the point of origin at all. We don't know that it originated in China. And if one of these strains is a lot lighter, and they're already saying at least 20% of us are asymptomatic when we get it. In other words, we'll never know. They say I've heard it's 3 times as infectious as the flu. I've heard 10 times. I've heard 100 times. Even Cuomo has been very, very open about the fact he thinks this has been here since, December or January and wants to test people for antibodies. I think that's one of the more truthful things he's saying. Now, what if you release the much deadlier version that is like the flu in November? Everywhere. You seed it everywhere. It's not that hard. You know it's going to go. It's a bioweapon. People are going to get infected. Most people won't even know they had it. It does have something like a 0.1% or a 0.01% kill rate, or even the point or a 3.6 is pretty high, but maybe that second strain is that 10, 15%, and they look at it like, well, we're going to release it, but a lot of people are going to get it, not know they have it, and already have some kind of a herd immunity. That's what these people believe. And when you're looking at biological weapons, nobody wants to work on a weapon that's going to kill children. And then the next thing that comes out to me when I think about all of this stuff, and we'll get to the propaganda angle in a moment, is that now you have, the Leviathan of China saying, this was a bioweapon from the United States, and Iran, who's one of our visible enemies, not just an enemy in the media, not just the people that banned South Park because of an episode they didn't like, right? But, people that are evil. We'll get that, Soleimani. America, You've got them saying U.S. bioweapon. And now you have the talking point not only from Trump, but Pompeo and everybody else that gets up there. Chinese virus. Virus. Listen, although this could have been developed in any nation's bios lab. It could be the United States. It could be somewhere in South America. Why not Canada? China, sure. Israel, a possibility. You've got Uri Geller, ex-CIA asset, and then Mossad asset. They got rid of him because he was working for the Mossad, saying that this was a bioweapon floated from China to Iran that got loose. I don't trust a word he's saying. But if it is a bioweapon, why has it got to be a nation state? We live in a world where even our alphabet agencies, the FBI, the CIA, Mossad, MI5, MI6, what do? They outsource most of their work to things like Booz Allen Hamilton or Stratfor or Black Cube. And even from those outsourcings, why wouldn't you just get a rogue agent that does it outside of their agency? This could be so compartmentalized that, you never really get a good idea. But what I do know is that enough information was gathered by CEOs and the deep state, if you will, that they knew this was going to explode. That's why Jeff Bezos made so money and dumped so many stocks. That's why somebody invested 27 million, made 2.7 trillion. That's why minions of the predator class in the Senate knew to short the market. That's why so many CEOs at Google and Disney got out when they did. They all saw this coming. Okay, haven't seen a billionaire drop dead from this thing yet. It's so weird. When that happens, maybe I'll think otherwise.
Right.
Now let's talk about the psychological operation of this bad boy. A lot of it does seem theater-like. For instance, last night in New York City, I'm not sure if you saw this, but they lit the Empire State Building up in red and made it look like an alarm. And the reaction from the people was as alarming as actually doing it, showing this group in mind thinking, we're going to get past this. I'm sorry, I'm in New York State, and I'm not the happiest to be here, but I'm about 180 miles from there. There's no way I would be on the other side of those bridges. There's just no way. The military presence is already very frightening there. The retrofitting is already frightening there. I don't know my local law enforcement. You're stacked up on top of each other. When they're predicting 40 to 70% are going to be infected, well, that means in that area you're talking 60 to 90% because they live so close to one another. These are all just facts by their supposed numbers. Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip of that, remember when they were promoting the Iraq war and still trying to go with that? The Jessica Lynch story was one that they took some truth and they manufactured this rescue. She was in a hospital. She was being taken care of by Iraqi doctors. That hospital was not a threat. There were no soldiers there. What do? They call Jerry Bruckheimer, and he directs a bunch of soldiers in basically a raid that they taped to get her out of there. They make a movie about her, about how she saved lives and she fired back at the enemy. And it took years before she came clean and said basically all of that was orchestrated. She wasn't a firefight, but, she didn't do those heroic things. And it wasn't a rescue because there were really no soldiers there. But America sure sold it that way. And Jerry Bruckheimer made many awesome movies that people ate popcorn to afterwards, didn't he?
It's Wag the Dog, man. I mean, how can we stare at this in the face historically? How many times we can see things like that where we know and they got caught manufacturing entire things. I mean, we're staring at Duma right this moment, and yet we still can't, a lot of people, I should say, still can't seem to wrap their mind around the possibility that they're capable of lying at to so many people at once, on a massive scale. I mean, that's what they pride themselves on, right? Manipulating us to get what they want. I think all of this stuff, and James Corbett actually did a really great video about this recently. I think it was even yesterday, about the clapping for the nurses and stuff, and it's how this is now becoming this kind of psychological push where now we're supposed to go out exactly at 7:30, go out and clap for all of, and it's like he said in the show, it's not like we don't respect people that are out there, putting themselves in risk to do this, and they make, but the point, if we have the third leading cause of death in this country is medical treatment, it's kind of not something we should be praising all the time right now. But the fact that they're risking themselves, yes. But the fact that we have to go out there and do it in this orchestrated manner and be like, yay, we're all part of the good society that cheers like we're supposed to, you can see that that's being driven by something. Like that, it's like he said, it's like the propaganda at the football games. I mean, This is an orchestrated event. And like he said, the main point is that the doctors are the new soldiers, right? This is the new 9/11, just like we're all getting at right now. This is the new transition into let's put it like this. The virus is the new ISIS, right? That's what's going to happen. They're going to be the new hypothetical boogeyman that they use to sell in all
the forever boogeyman. That's the scariest. And this time you can't put a face to it. It can always mutate. It can be something different. They're already socially training us to be 6 feet away from each other and further distance ourselves from human contact, which I think is disturbing and disgusting. They're not being straight on whether masks work or they don't. Is it airborne, etc.? And they never will be. There's going to be a consortium of opinions to confuse the public. And in that regard, yes, the psychological operation is very real. I want to talk about Cuomo and 9/11 and Rosie the Riveter and economic depression and World War II and all these themes that are being thrown out now kind of universally throughout the country. I want to talk about these super chats first. Jason and Ryan, are you familiar with George Webb's work? I am not very familiar with George Webb's work outside of some Q stuff early on that maybe, I don't know really much about Webb. You follow Webb?
Yeah, I'm familiar with his work. I haven't been, and I've seen some stuff that seems like some really solid research. Other things I feel like are a little bit reaching. I'm not that familiar.
Yeah,
so
me
I
neither.
wouldn't say I'm not one that follows his work extensively, no.
Yeah, no. Let's see. Thanks for all you do for us. Quarantine cash for you. Thank you, Jack Smith. Ryan T says Lyme disease. How did a hog virus in Egypt end up in the U.S.? The West Nile virus we brought here too. Well, again, if you look at that event 201, it is a novel coronavirus outbreak from South America in a pig, and don't you say otherwise. It's always an animal. It's always an animal. And then Ryan, what's this last super chat? Classic problem reaction solution agreed to manufacture a common enemy, e.g. Cold War, USSR, to satisfy the industrial, military, big pharma complex. That's part of it. But here's the other thing that I think that people are missing. All of these guys at the top are open and proud eugenicists. And when I say all of them, I'm talking about people that meet with one another, a.k.a. Bloomberg, Oprah, Gates, Turner, Soros. They're all talking about population control. They've all gleefully talked about sterilization. People like Prince Philip, who have a disdain for humanity in my eyes, have said these things. Who's to say one of these guys who realizes, hey, Rockefeller died at 101 and Kissinger's going to go out at some point too, doesn't decide to pull the trigger on their own and just release it in an op. And again, through compartmentalization, somebody who gets, for instance, the guy working at Harvard who has the 2 Chinese students, and I get it, they're Chinese military. Doesn't mean they were doing that on behalf of China. Double, triple crosses happen all the time. Somebody steps in and says, hey, I'm going to pay you triple. You're going to work on behalf of me. That's why it doesn't have to be a nation state in my eyes. But when I'm in New York, and I know that my friends have now been drafted. They've sent me the draft letters. You talked about World War II. So basically, I'll give you one example. My good friend from college, he's a dentist. They made him shut down his practice. They essentially sent him a volunteer form saying, and they wanted him to fill out. He wasn't going to fill it out, saying that they wanted him to come down to either Westchester County or lower for an undisclosed amount of time and intubate people. All right. So this is, beyond the military, beyond the National Guard. They're asking for more and more health workers. In fact, they just flew some in from Georgia. You can see that story as well. Another friend of mine who's a nurse up here got the same exact thing, asking him again to come down for an undisclosed amount of time to intubate people. Now, Cuomo has already mandated, and I think that this is one of the reasons, these walk through the hospitals in New York. First of all, a lot of hospitals, especially in New York City, are massive. The wings are massive. A 2-minute video, you'd have to walk through the thing for 45 minutes before you got through the whole hospital. Let's get that reality out there, folks.
Right.
And no one's saying right now that people are dying on the floor in the United States or New York. In fact, the only thing they've been saying is that they're dying and that they have the makeshift morgues outside to put coronavirus victims, which we have seen a little bit of. They're also not saying that the testing is overflowing. You saw that in the first couple days during the initial panics in New York, New Jersey, and elsewhere. I saw James O'Keefe drive through and say, the guy telling him it's not a big deal. Well, it's not a big deal right now because there's enough beds. But when I see the motion for SUNY Stony Brook being retrofitted, when I see staging centers in New Rochelle that have nothing to do with a real outbreak but cooked numbers, when I see up here, again, that every single hospital, I've got the Bassett, Foxcare, I've got 6 in my county alone, now has to have 50% more beds mandated, and that my buddies' girlfriends are now working an extra 1-2 hours every night. And not only do they have 6 confirmed cases, but I've known this, I believe, since Friday, and everything seems to be about 2-3 days behind. My state senator, James Seward, anybody watches my walk and talks, I walk by his office almost every time with my dog. He was going to step down this year because he's battling cancer. He and his wife have tested positive for this. Now, again, he's maybe a millionaire. I don't know. I don't think he's a part of the predator class, even if he wants to be. He's a little minion. That guy could die. You know what I mean? That's a real thing. He's not going to be taken care of like Prince Charles. So as this creeps in on people's states, because you're going to see it more and more in Washington State, you're going to see it more and more in California, Florida, you're starting to see it in New Orleans, and you see more of a military presence, it's going to be undeniable. Now, to me, a lot of people are like, well, you don't have any solutions, Jason. Well, first of all, massive testing voluntarily for those that want it. Asymptomatic testing in the United States, first of all, will get rid of the fear. The second thing is, if we are going to need these hospital beds, right now in the United States, if you're intubated, you got an 80% chance of dying. That's basically what the numbers are saying. If they put you on that respirator, you don't have much of a good chance of coming off. So why aren't we pushing the hydroxychloroquine more, the other antivirals, the vitamin C and the steroid treatment? Seems like it would be a lot less martial law-y, and it would be a lot more beneficial to you and I. We wouldn't have to shut down the country. Don't dare talk about MSC, aka stem cell treatment, because, there are some authoritative sources that say that, but we don't do that in this country because that's not big pharma friendly. I think if we were to change the mindset and mobilize the military and the healthcare system to deploy those things, instead of scaring the utter fuck out of everybody with ventilation machines, there would be a big different reaction. But again, that's not the reaction that implodes the economy and lets the predator class scoop up the scraps and consolidate power, my man.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing just because it's funny. You always find these connections back to the same usual suspects, But I think that the problem for me is, so on your note about the empty hospital scenario, I think, and this is what people need to see, like you know people that are there, right? That's a little different than finding someone online saying that it's empty, or saying that it's one way or the other, right? Like, for instance, I have family members who are, that know someone personally that says the same thing. So it's clear that there's somewhere you can see that people are being, overrun to some degree. And that's why it's so interesting that we're seeing this kind of thing being pushed about. And that's the same point I made on my show. Is I said, okay, look, there's any number of reasons why it might look like these places aren't busy. Now, and also I should just say counter that it also could just be that it is partially being manipulated for some psyop, but just to play both sides of it. It's obvious that like you said, the ICU could be overrun and everywhere else is empty because nobody wants to go in the hospital, right? That makes sense. Or it could be that they're using some hospitals for some things and some just for coronavirus. There's any number of things. If somebody wanted to prove this, they would just go to the one place where everyone's saying is overrun, take that video. It would end the whole meme, whether it would be true or not, So it's just like there's a weird push behind this. But I think we are seeing something happen that is affecting people. But my only concern would be that this is being, to some degree, hyped in this country in order to hide the fact that it's not affecting the same way as we're seeing in other places that are more severe. It's an interesting thing to think about, but we will not know until, like you said, and it's interesting to see Cuomo, of all people, saying this, until we actually get down to the information on the ground and find out whether this actually started back in September, the mysterious vaping illness that we've been covering, that has the exact same symptoms as coronavirus. It's obvious something was happening there that they covered up with the containment issues from Fort Detrick, and it's obvious, so until we get to the ground and test the samples and find out whether they've had it once before or, all these different things, we just won't know for sure. But it's good to hear from people like you that, you're there, you can see if have you done any videos where you've walked by those ones they're talking about?
That's in New York City. But as far as Bassett, every time I walk by there, for instance, if I go down to get a coffee, on my right is one of the smaller Bassett centers, right? Everybody's in a mask. There's a sign on the door. There's a certain place to go. Fox Hospital, that's a mile away from me. They've had the tents outside, which have only expanded for 2 weeks. My buddy that, we hang out, the last time I got punched in the face, I was right next to him. His girlfriend is a nurse there, and he's complaining that she's now starting to get backed out. Before they announced their first death, I had nurses texting me and saying, hey, we actually have our first death. It took another week to come out in the media. That's the other thing. Everything seems to be much slower than what I'm getting. And I know the police here.
Right? They're controlling the flow.
Well, I'll give you another example. So when I got that coffee this morning, the first person I ran into was a police officer. Before I got back to doing this full time, I was running the most popular bar in this little college town of mine. And so obviously I'm dealing with law enforcement all the time. And the last time I saw him was a few days before St. Patrick's Day. And other than St. Patrick's Day, there was another thing that was coming. We have Brewery Omegang here, and they do a thing called Snowmagang. Literally huge for our economy, both those things. And I go, oh, there's no way that's either of those are happening. This was like 3 or 4 days before they called the quarantine. He's like, what do you mean? I go, they're going to call a quarantine, man. They're gonna self-isolate. And he's like, come on, man. I'm like, no, they're really going to do it. And this is the cop. And first thing when I saw him today, I kind of forgotten about it because it'd been a couple weeks now. And he's like, geez, Jason, he's like, it looks like you were right. And he's like, don't predict anything else. And I told him not to go to my channel. But that shows that the police officers are often the last to know. I take care of my two little girls, my nieces, my sister downstairs, and their teachers were buying into the fact just last week that, we were going to be back to school by May 1st, before Trump gets on there, and then they want to believe it further. And I've got to bring reality to that thing. People are, first of all, we all deny our own mortality. None of us think things can touch us. We also are in a very unique society where we're number one. We're number one, motherfucker. Anyone messes with the United States, we will blow them out of the motherfucking water. And that is ingrained in our psychology, which further protects us. And just because we don't live in China doesn't mean they don't got a social credit score waiting for you either. And that's the other thing. This could be the birth of that type of meritocracy. If there are trade wars, if there are supply chain breaks that are huge that Amazon can't fix, if there is 80% unemployment in the country because this is rolling in waves for 3, 6, 9 months, you could very, very well see people that can't feed their families working in factories that are making masks, making ventilators, distributing X, Y, and Z. Again, I'm hoping not to see that.
Right?
What's that?
Interesting. Instead, it becomes the new war economy, shipped from missiles and bombs over to ventilators and masks and virus-focused stuff. It's just, it's a weird shift. You could think about that. That's
and the enemy is global, and it's invisible, and the fear that the predator class can instill in us through this is monumental. It's already here. Again, when people are walking around with masks, it's already here, whether they work or not. When social distancing is the new term I hate more than misgendering, it's here. Before we wrap it up, we got one more super chat. Retired railroad engineer that's a little old, but never experienced better reporters in my life. Well, thank you, man. I've seen some of the actual railroad engineers with their papers, please, talking about quarantine zones, and they were getting those March 14th, 15th. Those are on my Twitter as well. And I always looked. Thank you both for your bravery. We covered a lot here, Ryan. Is there anything else you want to leave my audience with regarding this whole thing and where we're moving forward to?
Man, yeah, I mean, there's so many things. Even just in this, I'm feeling like, man, there's so many things we could have gotten into. I'll leave just with the thought that I had when you were just saying that. Like, consider whether or not you think this is real, fake, bio, 5G, whatever scenario you think what we're dealing with right now. It goes away for whatever reason. What would stop them from then continuing to then forward from there, fake it over and over and over? So we always have, and now we because we know coronavirus is real. That's the mentality. All they got to do is just scare people with something, and you just have, and like you said, it'll be the waves. It'll never go away. It's the new Patriot Acts, the new 9/11 actions, and this just becomes the new normal. That's what we're hearing across the board, right? Get ready for the new normal. The economists coming out telling you here, the big government's here. It's not going away. Like, they're priming us for this. And so we, no matter what, no matter whether this is real, fake, or anything, we cannot allow the measures that they're already doing, because it's the end of what we think we are.
I totally agree. And, although I think a lot of this is kind of scripted at this point, maybe someone like Cuomo, who's as gangster as it gets, still doesn't want to see the fall of America. Maybe he is that Don, that crooked governor, but he's just like, you know what? We ain't going full military style. Sorry, not here, tough guy. I want to believe that narrative. I don't know. But you know what? To talk about that ever-present enemy that will be there again and again, have you seen the new Watchmen series yet?
I started watching. I don't think I finished the first series, but it's a good one.
You got to watch it because, again, he was so ahead of his time, Alan Moore, with the series in the 80s being predicated on bringing the people together against a false threat of basically this large squid EMP at the end and uniting people. And this series picks up where, in order to keep the fear going, the same hero character, Ozymandias, that pulled this off, and it's kind of alluded to in the movie. They don't use the squid or whatever, but they do that EMP that kills everybody. Mm-hmm. Well, it's really odd. So to keep the people in fear for decades, instead of a giant squid, every once in a while, randomly, it starts raining mini squids on the people, and that keeps them in line forever, and that fear ever present and ever going. But once the illusion is broken, then they don't have that control anymore. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break that illusion. The last Vagabond.com is where you can find him. And over 72,000 people, cannot be wrong. Make sure if you're not subscribed, I'd be surprised if you're not subscribed to the channel, to subscribe. Remember, if you want to support me, I got this little thing called a Rockfin. We're doing at least one exclusive a week, actually put 3 exclusives a week, or this week out. And from now on, every Tuesday at noon, you're going to get a premium live chat video. They're really trying to get behind this. It's an open platform where I don't have to worry about some algorithm burying me. And plus, if you actually join and get the paid content, because there's a ton of free content as well, you get my content. You get Graham Elwood. You get Ron Placone. You get Chael Sonnen. You get Ben Askren. You get John Fitch. It's like a Netflix of creators. And then if you want finances, what's that? You're about to be on there, right?
Yeah, I just joined today, actually.
Yeah, you know, I did a little inside baseball for everybody. I did a long video chat with Martin Florani, who runs that, and then Jamie and some of the other people over there on how the platform could grow. And I was mentioning how I was going to have you on and how you'd been demonetized today. And they said, yeah, we're actually going to talk to him and bring him in. And I got to tell you, I do love the platform, and it has a lot of really good things going for it. So soon, guys, you'll be able to get The Last Vagabond on top of my stuff as well. So I want to thank you all. I love you, and we will see you on the flip side.